Okay.
32 degrees.
Oh my, look at that, everybody.
Which is the
There you go.
which beach?
Which beach are you in?
Hapalmacht.
Is that in Tel Aviv?
It's south of Rishon LeZion.
Okay, very nice. Don't show us any inappropriately clad women.
No, I'm trying to put it between all that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. So you're ready to learn on the beach now?
I'm ready to go.
Okay. All right. So fantastic. Fantastic. Okay. So I apologize for my confusion yesterday, but I want to share with you what exactly we were talking about. Then this is where the intersection of loans and tzedakah falls into play. There is an interesting halacha in Hilchos tzedakah having to do with loans. And it's the Ramah that I have posted here on the screen. And he writes as follows, and I finally was able to click and make sense. Misha mafrish masrosa v'hil ani mishalo. So we're dealing with a person who normally tithes his income in order to give to tzedakah. Remember, we learned that not all of the poskim are on board that this is an obligation. Some poskim say that tithing your income is an obligation, and others say that it's not an obligation. That there's a separate, and it's separate from the mitzvah of tzedakah, and therefore there are some poskim who hold that it's not an absolute obligation, but it's a minhag Yisrael for a person to tithe to the best of his or her ability. Now, therefore, the Ramah says, Misha mafrish masrosa. If a person has accepted upon himself this halacha to religiously tithe his income, v'hil v'la'ani mishalo, and such a person makes a personal loan to a poor person, and he decides to make a deal with the ani as follows. I'm going to lend you the money, but I have a method where you won't have to pay me back. And here's how it's going to work. Mafrish meiser shalo umachashev al zeh shehil v'la'ani uma'akev la'atzmo ma shehifrish. The way it works is as follows. He says, listen, every month I make, let's say, $5,000. So every month I tithe 500, or let's say I net $5,000. So every month I tithe $500. Okay. I'm giving you a loan for $100,000. Okay. Or let's maybe we'll make it $10,000 just to make it. I'm lending you $10,000. And so here's how it's going to work. Every month, I'm going to deduct from what you owe me $500 by taking my Meiser money and putting it in my pocket. Instead of giving it to tzedakah, I'm going to deduct that amount from the debt that you owe me. Because the reason why I'm allowed to do that is because you're a poor person. So by my taking the $500, I could easily just give it to you. But instead of giving you a monthly amount of $500, I'm going to give you 10K up front. And the 500 that I would normally tithe, I'll just pocket. And the 10K that I give you is like an advance on charity. Okay? So that's what this halacha is discussing, that you have the option to do that.
So he's slowly converting the loan into tzedakah.
He's right. Well, he's reducing the loan amount every month with his tzedakah money.
So the person who took the $10,000 loan never has to pay him back any money.
Or
whatever's left as a hand transaction.
Well,
that's what we're saying. If, however, the person who got the loan becomes wealthy and no longer qualifies as an ani, then the person making those deductions can no longer make those deductions. Or let's say he passes away, in which case his heirs owe the balance of the loan, then he can no longer, and they're not considered aniyim, then he can no longer make those deductions. And he has to then resume his tithes, and the debt is, and you look at what was deducted up until that time. Let's say $4,000 from the 10,000 was already deducted over the course of a couple of years. Then you convert whatever is left. Now, the Shach says that in order for this to work, according to some poskim, not according to all, you would have to take the $500 every month and, let's say, tell a friend of yours, see this $500, lift it up on behalf of my debtor, acquire it for him, and then give it back to me. That's just to do the physical exchange.
So it's treated as if it's an actual payment.
So it's treated as an actual payment from the poor person.
You couldn't just take a ledger and just say 90.
So it's a machlokas in the poskim whether that extra step would be necessary. But that's what we were talking about yesterday, and that's why I couldn't make heads or tails of it.
10,000 stock amount of stock. You gave him a loan.
It's a loan, but it's slowly being converted into a charity,
Yeah.
into tzedakah.
But if the situation changes on others, then that loan now becomes payable. For instance, if the person who made the loan dies or the situation changes, he becomes a loan.
I don't know what the halacha would be if the lender dies, because there could be that the yorshim have an obligation to honor their father's agreement with the debtor. Because it's not clear to me whether it's because they don't have the option to change the father's agreement with the ani, or whether there's just an obligation of mitzvah l'kayim divrei hamesis, an obligation to fulfill the wishes of the decedent. Okay, but that's essentially what this halacha is addressing.
So the lender ani is aware of this arrangement.
The lender is not an ani, the borrower
No,
is
the
an
borrower,
ani.
I mean, the borrower is aware. Like he
Yeah,
knows
yeah.
that
He
this-
tells him.
this-
He tells him, because otherwise the ani
He's overwhelmed by the loan.
is not going to want to take the loan. He doesn't have the means to pay it back.
Right.
So this is a way of basically, I want to be able to help this poor guy, but I only want to give it to him from my tzedakah funds. But my tzedakah funds are not. I don't have $10,000 in tzedakah funds. So what I can do is basically advance my tzedakah tithes in the form of this $10,000 loan and slowly, basically deduct it over the course of a
It's
few
also
years.
protecting him in case
So
the guy
years
gets.
to longer, it's 500 a year.
No, it's 500 a month.
Yeah.
So 500 a month. So it'll just take a couple of years, a year and a half, something
It
like that.
also protects the guy, like in case he gets rich, maybe he thinks this guy could come into wealth.
It's even better
Yeah,
because
so
the
that
tax
way-
receipt for the thing.
Well, no, it's a double dipping. The thing is, you have to be careful how much money you give the ani, because if the measurement of an ani is whether he can afford to buy food for a year, feed himself. I mean.
Well, you're right,
would be a
Doug.
large enough amount that he's no longer an ani from the moment he has that $10,000.
Maybe yes, maybe no. It depends how we would define an ani and whether the guy needs it for, let's say, to pay his kids' tuition or to cover a balloon payment on a mortgage or something like that. Now, let's talk about a charitable organization that basically comes to Moish Posner and says, we want you to lend us, we need $10,000 to finish this project. And Moish says, guys, I regularly tithe, but I don't have $10,000 lying around. So the organization could tell Moish, no problem, take, borrow the money from your tzedakah fund, even though the money's not there, make a loan of your own assets, let's say your own savings, and every month you can deduct from what you would normally give to tzedakah, you can consider that a reduction of the amount of the $10,000. In other words, this is practical advice to a person who would like to make a large donation, but religiously tithes. And through his very strict tithing system, he could basically advance a large gift and then slowly deduct it and not tithe for the next, let's say, 18 months or something like that, whatever it is. Okay, so that's the basis of this halacha. Now, based on that,
One question on that.
Isn't there a sort of a cheshbon that you have to make each year about with your tithing? So like you're saying, paying this over a few years, but each year for whatever amount that you're giving, would that not be affected because you're spreading this out over a few years?
Let's say you're spreading it out over 2 years. It's okay because it's considered by doing this on your ledger and slowly deducting, you're pocketing every month what you normally would give to tzedakah, and then offsetting the gift
Right.
that you gave. It's considered as if you are tithing every month. That's the whole kunz of this halacha. Yeah. Okay. So based on that, I found an interesting shaila from Reb Zalman Nechemya Goldberg. Now, and the shaila, it works as follows. And I love this kind of, bless you, I love this kind of shaila because it shows you how magnificent the Jewish people are. We want to be able to live our lives according to halacha, and we want to be able to help other people. Like you see the intersection of those two things. And that's a beautiful thing, I think. That sort of like embodies what we're all about. Echad mevakesh l'sayeh lechavero shenikla lekoshiyim kalkaliyim. I want to help my friend. He's fallen on hard financial times. Okay, I want to help him out. V'chafetz l'salek chovosov, and I want to pay off his debts. He's got a creditor who's breathing down his neck, and I want to help him. I want to help the guy. Ela shadato legabos mechavero, but I also don't want it to be that I'm going to lose all that money. I want to be able to eventually, when my friend gets back on his feet, which I'm confident he will, I want him to pay me back. When he's able to get back on his feet. Is there a way for me to do this within the confines of halacha, such that even if I pay his debts without his knowledge, I can ask him for repayment, or without his consent, to get this creditor off his back, I can recoup that amount later. In other words, there is a problem normally that if you pay off your friend's debts without formally giving him a loan, he can later say to you, there was never a kinyan between the two of us. There was never a transaction. You just decided to do a chesed, and therefore you can't demand that I pay you back. Halachically, it's pareya chovo shel chaveru shalom midaito. The Gemara says that if I pay off my friend's debts without his knowledge, according to at least the opinion that we paskin like, I don't have a right to demand that I can't take him to Beis Din now and get repayment from him because I didn't go through the formal channels of lending him the money. Okay, so the question is, how can I avoid that problem? So Reb Zalman Nechemya Goldberg, who was one of the Gedolei HaPoskim of the latter 20th century, he says, Nitan limsar hamos lemalve b'toras matana. What you can do is with the following deal. You can go to the creditor and say, I'm going to give you a gift that's conditional. Al menas shekasher yifra haloi v'chovo botla hamatana v'yachzir lo hamos. The gift, I'm giving you a conditional gift. Let's say my friend owes $10,000 to his creditor. So I go to the creditor and say, I want to give you a gift of $10,000 on the following condition. When my friend pays you what he owes you, you give me back the money. So the gift only lasts so long as you haven't been paid back from my friend. And that way, you stop breathing down his neck. You give him some living space. You're not going to start foreclosing on his property. But I know, I'm confident that he's going to pay you back. And then I can go to my friend and say, listen, I just want you to know, I was able to get this creditor, I was able to stop him from foreclosing on your property, but you should know that I extended myself to make sure that would happen. So just make sure you pay him back. And as long as you pay him back, I'll get taken care of also. So that would be a nice thing to do, and it would be a wonderful chesed. And you've sort of you've come in and saved the day without having to pay the price for it. Okay? So that's the basis of this tshuva. And just to expand on it, he says, Mal veloni al manas lifra achar kach mimat nosanim, that it's based on this halacha that you're allowed to lend money to a poor person on the condition that you're going to dip into your tzedakah fund to pay yourself back. To pay yourself back, so it's as if you've given that money as tzedakah to that one particular ani as repayment for his loan. So he says, "Chashavti sheyesh eitza ledavar v'hi sheyifres amos lamalva shelo b'derech piron avor chova shel haloiva." So he just basically expands on this idea. Here's the way to do it, says Reb Zalman Nechemia. He says, pay the creditor the money, not as payment or repayment of the loan, but rather ela b'derech matana b'tanai, but as a conditional gift. Kolomar sheyakna hamos lamalva b'matana al menas sha'ata yaniach laloiva v'lo yidchok bo od. I'm giving you this gift of $10,000, Mr. Creditor, on the condition that you leave my friend alone. You stop your foreclosure proceedings. And then when my friend is able to pay you back, the gift is rescinded, the gift is batel, and you have to give me back the money. V'nasa pikadon lemafrei, so it turns out retroactively, it was not really a gift, but rather a deposit that was you were holding on for safekeeping. And then you'd have to give me back the amount that I gave you as a gift. And in this way, the debtor, who's my friend, is not exempted from paying back his debt. But he's got breathing space now. He doesn't have to feel the pressure of the creditor. He doesn't have to worry about foreclosure and getting his assets possessed. And that's the chesed that I've done for this guy. And therefore, that's everyone is happy. The creditor's happy he's got the money that is owed to him, and the debtor is happy because he has some breathing space. And I've done a big mitzvah, and I'll get my money back. I'll get my money back.
Knows about it, or no, he doesn't know anything.
I can tell him about it after the fact, or even if I tell him before the fact, but I just said, listen, I just want you to know I'm doing this. When you pay back the guy the money, I'll get my money back. But I wanted to give you some breathing space, so I dealt directly with, or I'm dealing directly with your creditor. And I could even ask him, is it okay if I do this, And he might say, yeah, I very much appreciate it. So
when the lender gets, when the person who pays the $10,000 get the money back, he then has to tithe that money again, is really so.
When the who? When we're not talking about tithing in this illustration.
The MISA, he still has to pay MISA on that money that he gets back.
No, this is
Just that situation.
Yeah.
One step
further. Okay.
So the lender gives the $10,000 to the whoever, and the borrower finally pays back the person who owed the money to.
Yeah.
So now the person who owed the money to pays his friend back the $10,000.
Right.
Because he took that $500 a month, whatever, out of his license.
No. You're confusing the two cases. He's now going to bring proof that there's no Meiser money in this illustration. This was a straight question, not having to do with the laws of tzedakah. I want to do a chesed for a friend to pay back his debt so that he doesn't go into foreclosure. So I can do that. And I can also make sure that I get my money back eventually.
Yeah.
So I'm protected. There's no laws, there's no mitzvah per se of tzedakah that's been fulfilled, but it's a chesed that I've performed.
Yeah.
There's no tithing discussed in this question. Let's assume that whatever money I use to pay back my friend's debts has already been tithed. So it's not a tithing issue. Now, to bring proof, says Reb Zalman Nechemia Goldberg, that this can work, he says, we find a similar kind of mechanism in the laws of tzedakah. The Mishnah is really the source. The Mishnah in Maseches Gittin, that Hamal v'moz es hakohen v'es halevi v'es ha'ani lios mafrishan lehin mechelko. If I lend money to a Kohen or a Levi or a poor person. Now, there are tithes in Eretz Yisrael in the times of the temple that I have to take from my agriculture, and many of those tithes even apply today. But we don't give it to a Kohen and a Levi because no one can prove that they're a Kohen or a Levi. But let's say it's the temple times. Everyone knows who's a Kohen and who's a Levi. So I basically say, I'm going to give money I'm going to give a loan to my friend Korotkin, who's Izzy. Izzy Kutnowski is a Kohen. Izzy is entitled to Truma, okay, because he's a Kohen. So I'm going to give him, he needs $10,000 quick. I'm going to give Izzy $10,000 cash. Then every season when I am tithing my produce, instead of giving that produce to a Kohen, I will sell that produce to a Kohen, someone who can eat Truma, take the money and use that as repayment for my gift or my loan to Izzy. So I can basically take from one pocket and put it in the other pocket. Normally, when you take Truma and Meiser, you have to tithe and give that stuff away for free. But I've basically given an advance of my future tithings to Izzy. So therefore, the Mishnah says I have the right to, instead of giving my next tithe away, I can sell it and put that money in my pocket. And that's how we slowly pay back Izzy's $10,000 debt. Okay? Yeah. Yeah.
When you give a gift, is this something you put on paper? Is this part of that whole star thing?
Yeah, so this would all be done with lawyers and they would draw up the papers properly, but it would be a gift, a conditional gift. It's a revocable gift. Okay, is that what you would call it, a revocable gift?
Condition.
Okay, and basically you can, whenever the creditor gets this amount back and paid back in full, he's got to give the gift back to me.
On paper, Igor won't give any problems with the creditor. There won't be an issue, because if it's not done through legal means, then, basically Igor can say, I don't have any money.
Right, correct. It would have to be done on paper so that you're calling Igor the Russian mobster, I guess. Yeah.
But
Okay.
you get on a second, you get your Meiser or Truma money, this loan money, you get it back. You took it from your Meiser and you get it back. So then technically you haven't paid Meiser.
No, you have.
On those years, but you got it, you're getting it back. You have to re-give it because you got a credit.
No, you're not.
If I take my Meiser money and I lend it to you, and then,
Oh, you mean I pay you back?
Pay you back. I said, I don't, it wasn't meant to be paid back. It was, I'm taking my Meiser for this year, it's $5,000 here. This is a gift.
Right.
This is entitlement for you. And then, you come back and say, listen, I just made a ton of money. Here's that $5,000 back. And you have no idea it was Meiser, Schmeiser, you have no idea, but I know in my heart that I gave it from my.
Yeah, so then whatever you
So-
deducted from Meiser, you have to
So
you
I
have to put
you have
back.
to read,
Yeah, you
or
have
else
to,
you lose the credit.
that's right. Yeah, you can't have it both ways. Okay.
I know people who made loans and arrangements for people to get money and they got a tax receipt. Then they paid the person back who made the loan to the license to give them. So they got a tax receipt and they got all the money back.
So that wouldn't pass the smell test with the CRA.
They had, but they had the original intention was to help the person.
I know,
So
but
they got a benefit.
So you'd probably have to report that to the CRA, would you not? I mean, I would imagine if the CRA found out that you got given,
It's right.
there you go.
Resile.
Better resile.
Okay. What does resile mean again?
Withdraw.
Withdraw.
Great word.
It's the
life now.
Resolving all over the place. Become a lawyer now.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. K'lomar she'adam yachol lahalvot la'ani ma'ot. So what this means is that a person can lend money to a poor person, and then to arrange with him, shepiron hachov yal derech nikui mechiyuve hamaisros shehamalvi yitchayev al perotav be'atid. And that my deal with you is that every season that I'm going to be tithing my agriculture, I'm going to be deducting from what the amount that you owe me, the amount of tithe that I would normally give away. So basically, I'm going to keep the tithe for myself or convert it or liquidate it into cash, right? And that'll be the payment for your loan. And therefore, it's also explained in that Gemara that since that was the arrangement between them, nimtza she'im yit asher ha'ani, that if the ani, let's say, becomes wealthy later, he's pater milashalem eschova. He doesn't have to pay his debt. V'hamal v'hifsid es hachov, and the lender loses his debt, meaning that if all of a sudden the ani becomes wealthy, that means I can no longer deduct the amount that you owe me from my meiser because you don't qualify as an ani anymore. So basically, I'm taking a bit of a risk when I lend you this money, this $10,000, because basically I'm saying, don't worry about paying me back. Okay? All you have to do is just sit tight and buy, let's say if every month I'm deducting $500 from my meiser to pay you back, so in the course of 20 months, the debt will be paid off. But all of a sudden, in month 9, I get a phone call from this guy, and he says, "I just won the lottery. I'm not an ani anymore, so I can no longer deduct the amount of $500 a month and pocket it for myself as repayment for the debt. But I also can't demand for him to pay it back because I told him, don't worry about paying me back." So halachically, he's not really obligated, and I'm going to basically have to swallow that loss if I do it in this way. Now, I could maybe draw up papers that says, so long as you're an ani, you don't have to pay me back. But if you do become wealthy and you no longer qualify as an ani, so that I can't keep my meiser because of that, you're going to have to start payments. Shekaven sheni yachol litain la'ani zeh meiser ani shalo me'achar shehit asher v'litva mimenu et piron achov gam ken enu yachol shari sikim shaperon yirak me hafrashas maisrosa nimsa shiaflis achov ayin shal. Okay, so basically he goes through this tshuva, and then he quotes the Ramah. He says, "V'chein pasuk harama biyora deyasham misha mafrish masrosa v'hil v'la'ani mishalo," that if a person normally tithes and he gives a loan to a poor person from his already tithed income, mafrish meiser shalo umachashiv al zeh shehil v'la'ani makev latzmo mashehifrish. So basically, this is what the Ramah is advocating. Because of hashach, shemikol makom tzarich lizakot et hamasrud al yedei acher avur ha'ani. And he quotes the Shach now, who says that every month I need to take the $500 that I normally would give to tzedakah, put it into the hands of any third party and say, lift this up on behalf of the ani, my debtor, so that it'll be considered as if I gave it to him. And that's how he basically is paying me back, or that's how, and then give me back the amount, okay? Because without that, how does the ani really take possession of that money? And if I don't cause there to be a formal mechanism where the monthly $500 gets into the hands of the ani, then how have I fulfilled the mitzvah of nason titain? You shall surely give the tzedakah. The mashma should sarach nesina, u'mechilas achov eina begeder nesina. Because just being moichol the debt is not considered to be giving tzedakah. V'chein mevur lehedje b'gemara sham deparch barei lo asu liyadei u'pirush Rashi shekim lo shelo higiu ha'maisus liyad ha'ani o ha'levi ha'relokim b'hem mitzvahs nesina. So the Gemara seems to be saying the same thing, and he goes through the whole thing. He says, "B'danu haposkim im din zenem arak ba'ofen shemal v'la'ani lechatchila al das lihipar mimenu ba'asid al yedei hafrashas masrosov." So something that the poskim contemplate is, does this apply only when he lends money to an ani, where the idea is that he's going to be collecting back the debt every month from his meiser money, O sha'af im hilvelo shelo al manas kain, or let's say he lent him the money without that condition. Uviyomin hayamim kishara shenu parei lo chovo hechlet legabos es chovo mimaiser ani shetzarach lahafresh. Or could you say after the fact, let's say I give a $10,000 loan to my friend without any stipulation. In other words, my expectation is you're going to pay back the loan. Nebuch, I see, you're not going to be able to do it. Can I, after the fact, turn it into tzedakah and deduct that from my future tithings? That's something that is discussed in the poskim, and the Nod de Yehuda has a long tshuva about this, and his conclusion is that even if it wasn't stipulated originally that way, I could turn it into a tzedakah gift and deduct it from my future tithings. Okay, so we'll hold it here for today, and now we'll go on and we'll finish the next part of the Sefer. Gives a short piskei halacha of going back to the laws of halva, which will continue Mirz Hashem tomorrow.